Well, a new year here in the Limitless Leadership Lounge, which means in time for another tri-generational conversation for the emerging leader. I'm John Gehring, your host, alongside my co-host, Coach Jim Johnson today. And Coach is so well connected and has brought along yet another phenomenal guest to give us some leadership insights today from a few different worlds. I'm really excited to have our guest on today. So, Coach, why don't you introduce him and let's get started?
Yes, I got to say, I'm going to give the bio to John, and then we'll get right started. So we're excited to have him. Leadership lessons from a badass leader. Captain John Havlik is a badass. In 2015, Havlik retired from the U.S. Navy after 31 years of distinguished service. For 29 of those years, he was a member of the SEALs, the Navy Elite Special Operations Forces. He has been a part of all the SEAL teams, including SEAL Team 6, considered the SEALs best of the best. Since retirement, John now runs JRH Consulting, a leadership consulting firm. And he also is the co-author of a great book I have that happened to read and endorse called The Leadership Killer. And he co-authored it with our friend Bill Treasurer. Bill and I are friends like John and Bill are. And Bill has actually been one of our few that have been two-time guests on the Limitless Leadership Lounge. So without further ado, John, we're excited to have you. Welcome to the Limitless Leadership Lounge.
Well, Coach, thanks for having me. John, thank you also. Look forward to being part of the podcast. Thank you.
Awesome. So, John, I know because we got a chance to talk before, but for our listeners, can you tell us the story of how you actually got into the SEAL? And then the second part, as you got into the SEALs, what were one or two huge leadership lessons you learned from working the SEALs?
Well, the quick, excuse me, the quick story, basically how I got in was I got recruited to be the swim coach at the Naval Academy, the assistant swim coach. And so there were 9 of us selected. It was the Navy's way of paying for it rather than going out on the civilian hire route. So we ended up having to go to boot camp and then we got orders to the Naval Academy, and I got to do that. It was a great opportunity for me very early on in my career. And when I was there coaching, it'd been about 9 months, something like that. A SEAL checked into the physical education department at the academy, and he came down to the pool to check out the hours of lap swimming because he was a big triathlete. So I was talking to the head coach, and I said, "Who's that guy?" And they said, "Oh, this is so and so. He's a Navy SEAL." And I said, "What's a Navy SEAL?" And he goes, "Oh, there's like the Green Berets, Navy." And I had no clue because I thought coaching was my chosen profession in life at that time. And so we became friends, we worked out. And I guess he slowly started feeding me the Kool-Aid, so to speak. And I started drinking more and more of it. And it really, the interest of what they did, what the SEAL is all about, what they did. And then I was just at a pivotal point in my life where the coaching wasn't going the way I wanted. So I said, why not try to make the Navy a career, or at least make the Navy my profession of choice, and to try the SEALs. And so when I did that, the academy was the folks there they were great. They were like, "Hey, whatever we can do to help you in your process, let's go do that." So long story short, a lot of paperwork and things like that. But it's funny working at the academy. It seems like everybody who works there has a classmate somewhere in wherever the organization of the big Navy. Say, hey, they make a couple phone calls. But in reality, I got selected to get a commission because when I was there, I was enlisted and I was coaching future officers. And I said, why not? I can do this. I'm just as good as they are, And so I went for a commission, and then I went for a guarantee to go to SEAL training afterwards, and it all worked out. So very lucky on that. And what I learned in the Navy, and it's nothing real prophetic or anything. It's just kind of one of those things, our philosophy has always been work hard, play hard. And I kind of like that, another thing that attracted me to it. So I was out one Friday afternoon and just enjoying the nice San Diego weather. And let's say that. And I met up with a couple of senior SEALs that were Vietnam veterans. heavily decorated. And and they grabbed me and they said, I was very young. I just come out of SEAL training. And they said, "Hey, come here, sir. We're going to teach you how to become a successful officer in the SEALs." And I was like, okay, whatever, let's go, So I just sat down with them for a couple hours and they told me a lot of stories. And basically, the two things they really told me and still resonates with me today is the first one was the men want to see you out front making decisions. You can't lead from your office, you can't lead from the rear. If you want to build trust and confidence in your people that you are a good leader, you have to be out front making decisions. And so that was one that resonated with me really to this day. And then the other one was to bring your people into the planning process. And so we're very small groups, but so all the maturity and experience, especially when I was a young junior officer, my men had and the people that I worked with. And so I was foolish to try to think I knew it all or I could do it all without their input and their support. And so, that's one of the successes we have. That's why we do very well is we bring our people into the planning process. So it's a group effort and it works really well.
Yeah. But to lead, you have to be able to lead yourself. That's, the first characteristic of a leader. And for you to take that jump from coach to actually getting your hands dirty, so to speak, what kind of leadership traits did that take in yourself? And what kinds of things did you do to develop yourself into a strong leader of yourself in order to be able to make that decision?
Well, the biggest thing you have to do, luckily in SEAL training, they put the officers in a lot of scenarios where you have to make decisions. You have to lead, no matter, it may be something simple, but the beauty of that training is, they're looking, officers get a lot of scrutiny because they want good ones going into the teams. And so they put us in a lot of different situations where you have to lead and make decisions. Basically, they're just looking to see if you can make a decision under duress or stress, and you can make competent, good decisions. And so that was very beneficial. But there's really nothing more intimidating than as a young junior officer than walking into a room of SEALs, and because they are quick to tell you when you're wrong. They don't tell you when you're right, but they're quick to tell you when you're wrong. So you have to have a lot of self-confidence in yourself that, yeah, I belong here, that yes, I'm your leader. I'm going to make the best decisions for me, and you can trust me and do that. And that was hard to do, especially very early on, until you start gaining experience, your reputation starts to develop. That was the best thing. Just you got to take that step forward and just go in there and go, yeah, I'm the boss, and but I'm gonna look to you for a lot of input to help me go through. Yeah, that was a big thing. And the other thing is I'm pretty quiet, actually, being a swimmer and even though I was a coach, I was very, very stoic, so to speak. That's what people used to call me. And so I had to learn how to communicate, and get better at dealing with people. And luckily with the SEALs, it's a pretty small group, so you can get a lot of one-on-one FaceTime that you couldn't get in a large organization. So I used to try to work on my communication skills because I really think that's one of the most effective tools of a good leader is effective communications and how to communicate them, not just make decisions, but communicate it and get feedback from your people.
It's a great point. But John, you brought up a word that's I often challenge leaders is tell us what's your thoughts on how you build trust as a leader.
Well, the beauty of the SEALs was that the officers and enlisted went through the same training together. And so we have that commonality that once you leave training, you go to whatever respective SEAL team you go to, that you've already been there, that you've got the same thing that everybody else has, and so that adds to the initial layer of trust. But it's just one of those things to build trust. I tried to be just you want to be the best shot. You want to be the best at everything, because you are the leader And although you're not, you want to put forth a good effort. You want to show that you care about your people. And one thing that really helped me a lot was, like I said earlier, communicating, was talking and learning about my guys and their families and stuff. And because a lot of leaders don't do that. And I wanted to know, because it wasn't just what was happening at work. They had family issues, they had problems at home, and we had to take care of it, especially when we went overseas, because everything heightens up. So you want to learn about them. When you take that time to learn about people, they respond positively to you.
You also mentioned the power of communication
Yeah.
and how important that is as a leader. Was there a way that you developed your communication skills intentionally as you became a coach and then beyond? Or was it just kind of baptism by fire? How would you suggest a leader to go about improving their communication skills?
Well, it was leadership by fire. There's no doubt about it, especially in the beginning. But I think when I got into more senior positions of authority, um, I used to do this one tour I had in Panama, whereas every Friday afternoon we had a thing called a field day, and that was just cleaning the workspaces. And then the executive officer, the number two guy below the commanding officer, would come down, check the cleanliness, let everybody go before the weekend for Liberty. And so I took that opportunity to get out of my office, leave my computer, leave my cell phone and everything, and go down and just talk to my people. And which is highly unusual, and especially for the executive officer, because if you don't understand the relationship, the commanding officer is like the good cop, and the executive officer is like the bad cop. So he handles all the discipline problems, the day-to-day operation of the unit. And so when the XO is walking around, it's usually not to tell you you're doing a good job. So it was funny when I first started it, people would run away, and I'd have to chase them. I'd go run after them to get them. But it was really interesting, because I made it a commitment. I committed to it, and I really went down and I made an effort to talk to them, because it was like what the Navy calls a deck plate leadership. That's where you go down to the deck plate of a ship. That's where the actual work is done. And so when you're trying to culture change or institute new philosophies or ways of doing business, the people that know the best are the ones that are going to have to ultimately execute it and make it work. And so I used to go down and just talk to my people, and not so much care about the cleanliness. Of course, yeah, they had to pass the test, but for me, it was just a great opportunity to go out and meet my people and just learn about, because overseas assignments are difficult, not just on the service member, but the family members also. And as the executive officer, I needed to know about everything. So I learned if they're having troubles, are they adjusting, what's going on, how their kids doing in school, things like that. And that really helped me. And I think that built a lot of trust and rapport that I used and carried on in all my further assignments, especially when I would go overseas. Yeah.
It's good. Hey, John, how about as far as in your bio, you talked about being part of the Team Six. Now, I'm familiar with the Navy SEALs, and I know it's rigorous training, and you're the best of the best. But tell us more about what is Team Six, and maybe a story or a lesson you learned from Team Six.
I can't tell you much, but it's the best of the best of the best. That's kind of the way it is. It's, you volunteer for the organization, you go through a heavy vetting process, a lot of interviews and endorsements from your command. For me, I had to get endorsement by my commanding officer, and then had to go do interviews and talk with people, and a lot of it was just um, it was it was interesting. It was hard, 50%. The normal attrition rate in SEAL training is 70 to 75%. So those are the people that aren't going to make it. So very small classes. At Dev Group, it was 50%. So the national attrition rate was, even if you take the best of the SEALs, 50% aren't going to make it. And there's for various reasons on that. But it's super intense. It was fun. It was dangerous. It was, I think, I just think the big thing I tell everybody asks me why it was so difficult and why it was hard. And I always think, even as an officer, you juggle many hats, but the biggest thing is that worst case scenario comes in and you have to become a shooter or an operator. You have to have the same qualifications and proficiencies as the enlisted do, and they have to have that trust in you. And I don't think a lot of people can juggle that capability of not even just being a leader, communicator, but you also have to be an operator, and that was really hard, but it was a great experience. It was a peak of my career, so to speak, operationally. But it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. Yeah.
How long were you on the Team 6 then?
2 years.
2 years.
Okay.
Is that typical about what people
Well,
ask?
for officers, usually 2 to 3 years. Yes.
Okay.
That's, the Navy wants officers to get a very dynamic and different career, so to speak. So every 2 or 3 years, you're changing. The opportunity always comes back. You can go back, but the enlisted, they can stay there. Once they get there and they make it through training and everything, they can stay there for their whole careers. So it's a good opportunity. But yeah, great organization. Americans should sleep well knowing they got brave, great people like that.
Yeah, the best of the best.
Yeah.
Wow. It must take such resilience and physical and mental stamina to be a part of an organization that is the best of the best, and to make that team. I mean, that's amazing. So, thank you for your service, and thank you for everything that you've done for us. Let's talk a little bit about resilience too, because that has to be a characteristic that you must develop as a leader, whether it be in your case, or just a leader of themselves or a family or a company. How did you practice resilience? And tell a story if there was any time when you didn't feel resilient but still needed to overcome that feeling.
I think part of the deal of being a swimmer, I don't know if Coach Johnson can relate with this, being a basketball guy, but when you stare at a black line for 4 to 5 hours a day, for 2 times a day, 6 days a week, you build a lot of internal resilience on yourself to just push through and then perform, because in reality, there's a lot of individualism in that part, even though swimming is a team sport. It's very individualistic. All the individual races add up to a team win or loss. So that really started my whole process. And I think it carried over into SEAL training, because SEAL training is just a grind. That's really what it's all about. It's a day-to-day grind. And I had gone through that in swimming. So I go, yeah, I know how this is. I know what it's like to be in season and just, the day-to-day mundane doldrums of just training, but still trying to train at a high level to ultimately perform in a lower. And so that really carried over to me with me in training. And that's something I still carry on today. What I did in swimming, where I am in swimming, is really set to who I am and what I'm all about. I guess, the thing about resilience, what I found in SEAL training was they talk about teamwork, but it's just like swimming. It's a day-to-day challenge, and there's a lot of individual one-on-one conversations with yourself. But if you're having a bad day, you can look to your left or your right, and your classmates are having a bad day too. You're not going through it alone. So I think that's the beauty of what SEAL training to me was all about. Is you may seem like you're going through it alone, and it's very individualistic, but no, you're not. You're going through with a class, and that makes it a little bit easier. And that kind of helped me. I did have one day when I thought I was going to quit during Hell Week, and I don't. It's a long story, but they called me out and basically I had to make the biggest decision of my life in about 30 seconds. And but the beauty of it is they gave, and I was just I don't know if I always tell people it's like I just needed a hug from my mom. I was having a bad day, and those hugs really help you when you're just having a bad day. And they just gave me an opportunity to rethink, but they also kind of told me, as an officer, you have to think about your men and can't think about yourself. And so that really was the reality check I needed to kind of, okay, all right, I had a moment of weakness, I'm ready to go. Let's carry on. And they gave me an opportunity. I never thought about it again. So it's one of those 30 seconds, but it was one of the biggest decisions that I'll ever made in my life. So
Would you say that your time swimming, and the resilience that you built was a big part of why you were able to be successful?
no, absolutely. It's like my goddaughter said, swimming's not a real sport. And I'm like, oh my God, she was a basketball player, So,
Of
so
course.
I was like, man, you've never gone through a swimming workout before. So yeah, I think it was because just when I competed, I swam in three of the hardest races every dual meet, and there wasn't a lot of time in between. So yeah, I actually seemed like I swam better as I got the more tired I got, which is kind of, it doesn't make sense. But by my last event, a very dual meet, I felt great, when other people say he should be dead. He's already done two races. So I think that's what really helped me. There's nothing more resilient than putting a good 2 hour workout in. And I was really lucky when I was swimming to be able to I spent a couple summers out training with a bunch of Olympic swimmers, and those guys are phenomenal, the men and women that were out there, and just how they raced, how they trained, how they approached everything was just really helped me to build that resilience. Yes.
John, I shared a couple quick, so a snippet of swimming. First of all, me and the pool are not best of friends. But my son early in his life was on a swim team. I think he was 8 or 9 years old, and I would go to some of his practices. I was just amazed on the fact that they would go down to one end and then come back to the other. So building resilience. And the other little sidelight, as I become more of a veteran coach, we had this fitness test called the Pacer, which was a run test where you had 20 meters between, and every six,
Right.
7 or 8, the speed would, but it ended up being a great test of character and resilience because often many students would underachieve because they just didn't want to give their best. And what I found I remember getting on some of my players and they dropped out. And then just the opposite, a guy that I felt was one of my great overachievers and ended up playing the NBA a couple years. He was 6'6", about 220 his senior in high school. And a good score for the Pacer was like 80, and he did over 100. So it just showed what kind of character he had. So, but going back to it, I'm admire after my son, just that snippet of what swimmers and the fact that Michael Phelps, all the gold medals, all the training he must have done is just, it is amazing.
No,
So,
he's at another level, but
yeah, yeah. So,
no, but
well, I got to ask you this, going back to a leadership thing, I know one of the things that the military is really it's important to them is the debriefing sessions. And I think so often as leaders, I know we got better as coaches in doing that, but now that I work with a lot of businesses, a lot of them they don't do much with debriefing. Can you talk about the power of debriefing and how well you did it in the Navy?
it's everything. It really is. I mean, because ultimately you learn what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong and how you could improve and do better. So that was a big thing we learned after everything we did. And that was the beauty of being in the SEALs is everything we did, no matter how simple. It's like, hey, we're just going to the range for a range shoot. You had a pre-brief, you did the evolution, and they had a debrief afterwards. And it just so the more complex things got and the operation and more people were involved, the debrief was huge because like if you're using helicopters, the crew, you could be wanting to do it one way, but the crew that's flying the helicopter may have a better way of doing it, and you got to listen to those people, or, whoever's supporting you. And so I think debriefs are huge. And you're right, businesses don't do that. They tend to just rely on, yeah, if we've been successful or not, the bottom line, or can we be doing it better? Because ultimately, what you learn on the battlefield is the enemy is always changing, and if you can be successful, but if you can get lulled into a sense of complacency and think you're doing great, and the enemy or your competitors are out there looking for ways to get better. And if you're not staying on top of it, even though you're doing well, you're ultimately it's going to catch up to you. So yeah, the after action debrief was huge in everything we did. Yes.
Yeah. Hey, John, I also want to shift our focus before we get too far into the conversation about the leadership killer.
Yeah.
And that's something that I know you wrote a few years back, but tell me a little bit about the inspiration for that and what readers can anticipate if they pick that up.
Well, as you mentioned, Bill has been a guest on your show. Bill and I were West Virginia graduates, and so we kind of teamed up. I do some speaking for him and his business, Giant Leap Consulting. But he was wanting to write a book, and another book, and so he said, "Hey, you want to co-author?" And I said, "Yeah." So ultimately, when you write a book, you got to have a hook. What's the book all about? Why are you writing it? And so we used to have conversations all the time. Well, especially as I prepped to speak for a group of his, was just leaders who do stupid things. Really, is common sense. Better, but still you do it. And why do they do it? And just a little bit on my experience with leadership and watching other senior leaders that I worked with. And we just kind of came up with this idea of hubris, individual hubris, and an excessive ego that makes good leaders do really stupid things, like they know better. And then it was the same time with the election a few years ago, with just some of the personalities and characteristics, some of the leaders that are in Washington and other locations. And I think you see it all in all aspects of life now. Just the term hubris, and they tend to forget. My observation, it's my hypothesis, so to speak, is, and Bill and I talk about it, was you got to remember your roots and where you came from. And it's easy to get, the higher you up in the organization, power is very seductive, and it can make you do dumb things. And so as you get higher up, it's really important that you remember your roots and where you came from, because that really sets core who you are. And that was the purpose of the book, just to remind leaders not to get too big for their britches, so to speak.
Yeah.
And delving in, John, who was the best leader that you ever learned from, and why?
That's a great question. Oh, man. Well, I don't know if there's ever really one. I think what I responded to, the best coaches that I responded to, the best instructors I responded to, and the best officers or the senior mentors or leaders that I responded to were the ones who appreciated your work and your feedback, and taught you how to, let's say it, just wanted you to do better, so to speak, that they weren't so tyrannical, they were, or what, they weren't, it's my way or the highway. I worked for plenty of those people, and I just tuned them off. I had coaches like that too, It's just the ones I felt comfortable with are the ones that really showed that interest in me and taught me. They may be mad at me. Certainly in SEAL training, the instructors, they can really come after you. But the best ones used to grab me, pull me aside, and like, sir, what are you doing? You know better than that, and just teach you these little things in life that you wouldn't get. Those were the ones that I responded to. The coaches that showed that interest. Hey, you can really do this. Maybe do it a better way. And then, so there's really no one. I just took my philosophy on leadership was I took the best and the worst of everybody I worked with, and then shaped who I wanted to be and what type of leader I wanted to be.
Mm. Well, you mentioned some of the inspiration you had for the leadership killer. Did you have any personal experiences with leaders throughout your time, either in swimming or beyond with the Navy, um, that you felt inspired you in a negative way, inspired you to not become like that particular leader, or because of a particular characteristic or a way they went about things?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's I think the biggest things, yeah, the coaches, like I said, it was just one of those things that were very dominant. Just really didn't feel like I was learning anything. And then with the leaders in the military, because I worked with some really good ones, and then I worked with some really bad ones too. And I think the one thing I didn't want to do was be uh, two-faced. I didn't want to, like I said, do as I say, not as how I do. I wanted to set the example. So if I'm setting the tone and the culture, I have to act a certain way. And I saw a lot of leaders kind of take advantage of that. And yeah, just I think I think the biggest ones I didn't want to be was, wow, too political. How's that?
Mm,
You
okay.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
that I wanted to be judged on my merit and my ability, not who I knew, or who my best friend was or something like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I just wanted,
Yeah.
I believed in what the Navy told me in the very beginning is you take the hard jobs, you do well on them, you'll get promoted. And that's the way I led. It wasn't who I knew or who my best friend was, who's my mentor, who's my sea daddy. That's what we call mentors in the Navy.
Mm.
And I think they're important, but that's not who I wanted to be. And so I tried to I stayed away from those who were political in nature and how they did business. I didn't like that. I didn't like that type of leader.
Yeah, so as leaders, we need to remove all bias, right,
Well, I
and
mean,
merit based.
I don't know if you can eliminate everything. I think it's just, you just got to be fair about it. Got to be fair and consistent, and, uh, and that's what I tried to be. I just, very early on, you get this whole reputation of what you think SEALs are. And, I had several officers who tried to say, you need to be more aggressive, all this other stuff. I'm like, I don't know why. I'm doing the job. Just because I'm not screaming like you are, it doesn't make any difference. I mean, like, you're very I could never lead through intimidation. I never thought those leaders turned me off immediately. Um, I just, I don't know, maybe I'm just rambling right now. No, I had to be authentic, and the leaders who aren't authentic, you can pick them out.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. So, yeah.
Well, John, as we're getting close to closing up, last question from me is, tell us about your consulting business, and maybe an area that you see where you're helping leaders, something that seems to be glaring as far as a weakness in leadership that you're able to help clients with.
Well, I do a little consulting on the side. I think mostly what I do is I do some keynotes and things like that. So, I mean, I enjoy the speaking like you do, and I like giving back. I mean, people love to hear the SEAL stories, and so I'll tell them. But I hope what I like to think is I've gotten better at tying it all together on how it applies to them. And so what did I learn that in SEAL training that helped me get through SEALs, helped me get through life. How I got through school. I used SEAL training. I got my degree, things like that. I just like giving back now and teaching people to kind of. I like to think my philosophy in life is to do things that have been unique and challenging, and 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 I can always remember. I don't know how you feel as a coach, but when people doubt you and your players seem to respond a lot better when they got a chip on their shoulder, And so yeah, please tell me I'm not going to make it through SEALs. Please tell me I'm not going to do this. All these things have inspired me to prove people wrong. And I like doing that. So that's how I've done things.
Well, you gotta give us, obviously, we're not going to use your whole keynote, but can you give us one story of inspiration to share with our audience?
Um, I think the big thing was almost, like I said, almost quitting in Hell Week, and it was just a momentary lapse of weakness. And the biggest thing is what kind of led to it is we've been up. Hell Week goes from Sunday night to Friday afternoon, so it's a week-long event, and you get about 4 hours sleep, they tell you, and throughout the whole week.
Wow.
And for the whole week, you were cold, wet, and miserable, and sandy. And so it's nasty. But it's the ultimate test. It's really our quality control check of identifying the trainees that want to be there from those that don't. And I was just having a bad day. And I had a carton of milk that we were eating at about 2 o'clock in the morning. And I had a carton of milk, and I wanted to drink it. And the instructors came by and threw some sand in on us and on the class. And the sand knocked the milk out of my hand. And I watched the milk drain into the sand, the cracks of the sand, and all my motivation went with it. Everything that kept me going through 2.5 days of Hell Week just went with the milk down into the sand. And so that was a big, that's when I kind of mentioned that I started thinking about quitting. And that's when I got the 30-second, the big stories instructor grabbed me and he just said, why do you want to quit? And I said, I didn't really have a good answer. I was very embarrassed. I was just, why did I do that? And he just said, look, I'm going to go over and get a cup of coffee, and then I'm gonna come back and get your decision on whether you're gonna stay with the class or quit. And on the way over, he said, but Ensign Havlik, don't make a decision in 30 seconds. You'll regret the rest of your life.
Oh, wow.
And so he got his cup of coffee, and I came back and he said, what's your decision? And I said, I'm gonna go back with the class. And he said, good, let's never talk about this again. And I am eternally grateful to that instructor because they saw something in me that I didn't see myself. And so that's what I try to think, especially as leaders and coaches, is you try to get the best out of your athletes, the people that work for you. And that's kind of what I try to do now.
Wow, that's leadership right there, is finding something in others that they don't even see in themselves. And
yeah, I was in a bad state, I was, and so for them to give me that opportunity to kind of rethink what I was doing was eternally grateful, because I never would have gotten to do what I did for 31 years. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We can't always trust ourselves, right? I mean, we can't always trust the emotions that we're feeling, because sometimes they're just not reality. And sometimes they're emotions that are only temporary. And like that instructor said, don't make that decision that you'll regret the rest of your life. As a leader, how do you suggest that we bring the best out of our, for lack of a better term, followers or team members, even if they don't see and have that confidence in themselves?
One thing we did that worked really well was we put people in charge of aspects of training. So like if my platoon or something we were going to go jumping for parachuting for 2 or 3 weeks, we would pick, okay, you two guys, you're in charge of the trip. You've got to coordinate all the logistics. You've got to coordinate all the flights. You've got to coordinate the support. You've got to get hotels, all that stuff, everything that comes with travel and working with a large group, and giving them the opportunity to show their potential, to lead and organize and put together a good training evolution. And I thought the military did really well with that, because when you look, I was just thinking about this the other day. A very junior sailor is in charge of a $40 billion aircraft. He's a plane captain, and that's, the pilot flies the plane, but the plane captain is the one who's in charge of the maintenance, the readiness of that aircraft. And they're very junior. You're talking 21-year-old sailors, and so like giving your people those opportunities to show their potential and excel is the best thing we ever did. And that's really what you got to do. You got to give your people the opportunity to shine and show themselves.
That's great. So John, in wrapping up, what would you like us to share in the show notes as far as contacting you?
Well, you can contact me on my website, coachhavlik.com, but it's going to be going through a rehaul here. So
okay.
I'm doing a little bit of a rebrand, as you well know.
Yeah.
So, but for me right now, is the big thing is to give back, and I'm looking for those opportunities to leverage my skills, my experience, what I did in school, my study, to help people just do better in life. Because that's my goal, to learn what I've been and share it with others.
And that is, again, coachhavlik.com, Havlik. And then also, I will mention, if you do want to grab the Leadership Killer, you can find that on that website as well, and coachhavlik.com/book, the Leadership Killer with Bill Treasure, your co-author there. So that's definitely worth checking out as well. Again, coachhavlik.com down in the show notes. Go check that out to get more from John. John, we appreciate your time today and your insights. Thank you so much for joining us on the Limitless Leadership Lounge.
John, thank you. Coach, thanks for the invite. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, John. It was a pleasure. And again, thank you for your service.